There are a lot of really popular pet reptile species that are kept all around the world in the hobby, in the industry, whatever you want to call it. And they're all really good choices. Ball pythons, corn snakes, even marshmallow, this bull snake here, can all be wonderful reptile pets. But there are some other species that are very closely related to these more popular choices that also make really good reptile pets. So today I'm going to talk about 5 different, essentially, cousins of the more popular choices that make wonderful pet reptiles. Joining me is Marshmallow, who's basically a rehabilitated rescue that's been donated to be an animal educator and ambassador. So we're going to start off with the close cousin of the bull snake, Pituophis catenaphorsaei. This is actually a different species of Pituophis, and that is the Baja Cape gopher snake, Pituophis vertebralis. Now, this is very similar to the other gopher snakes. However, it's not catenaphor. It's an entirely different species. That's why we're calling it essentially the cousin. Now, you guessed it, it probably comes from the region of, the drum roll please, Baja California, obviously. Now, this is a really, really cool species snake, and I do have, in fact, one male of the species. However, he is in shed coming out of brumation and is very cranky at the moment. So that's why we have Marshmallow here, and I don't get to show Marshmallow off too much for the camera, just to programs, but the Cape gopher snake, or the Baja Cape gopher snake, comes from Baja, California, part of Mexico, and there are some differences between those two of the other gopher snakes, the San Diegos, the Sonorans, heck, even the bull snakes, and this separate species, the Baja Cape gopher snake. So number one, obviously where it lives, there aren't really any other gopher snakes over there in that part. There are some Sonoran gophers and things like that that live in similar climates, but they are a little bit different. When you look at it, they're usually a little bit thinner, and they're very famous and very, very beautiful looking for their really cool, bright orange to red coloration on the front part of their bodies, and as it gets closer to the tail, it turns into kind of almost a dark chocolatey, even black color on that yellow background. It's kind of like what the Bredls or the Bredli eye python do, where they start kind of that rusty red color and they get all the way down to a very dark tail, only in Pituophis or North American colubrid form. Now, the area that they live in is kind of weird. Normally we think of Baja, California, it's close to the equator, nice and warm, kind of tropical. Well, they actually live in kind of essentially thorn scrub deserts in the regions of Baja that are actually sometimes have very little, almost no precipitation for most of the year. And despite all this, they actually enjoy much cooler temps and will actually go off food if they go too warm. So if you keep that the same way you keep a bull snake or a Sonoran gopher snake or something like that, it actually won't be happy and actually needs a little bit cooler temps. And of course, like all North American colubrids, they actually are 2 distinct populations of the vertebralis, and depending on which keeper and biologist you want to fight with, again, it depends on whether or not there are actually 2 different subspecies of them. One being vertebralis and the other one that I always mispronounce, so as always, I'm just going to keep Marshmallow out because honestly, I just really like interacting with her. But this next one up is a cousin to the emerald tree boa and the Amazon tree boa, and that is the annulated boa. Corrales annulatus. Now, the annulated boa is another tree boa that it's actually the farthest north of all of the Corrales genus. They live in parts of Central America as well as the very furthest northwest parts of Ecuador and Colombia. Now, there's a lot in common with the Amazon tree boa and the emerald tree boa. They're both incredibly, almost exclusively arboreal. They both like to eat birds. They're all, because there's 3 total that we're talking about, they're all a little hands-off, and they all come from that kind of same Amazonia region. However, there are a couple differences, obviously. So when we think about the Amazon tree boas, they're a little bit more slender, kind of a bigger head, and they're kind of the hardiest of all the different tree boids. The emerald tree boas, there's the 2 distinct ones, the Amazon basins and the northerns. They are a little bit more delicate, a little bit more prone to internal parasites and things, a little bit more care needs to be taken to them. The Amazon tree boa is very variable with all the different color patterns and things like that. The emerald tree boa is the really nice bright green that when they're born, they're kind of a reddish color and then they eventually turn that really nice green color. The annulated boa are very similar to, they're kind of like this really cool hybrid of the two, where they're kind of like the garden phase Amazonian tree boas, where the annulated, named for their pattern, they're either kind of like an orangey, rusty kind of Amazon dirt floor color, and then more of kind of like a grayscale. And those are basically the two color phases that we have. As far as I'm aware, there are no other color phases or morphs out there. They are a little bit hardier than the emerald tree boas, similar to the Amazon tree boas. Their head shape looks a little bit more like the emerald tree boas, and based on what I've researched and been told by multiple keepers, they are in fact a little bit more handleable than both the emerald tree boas and the Amazon tree boas. So for an unusual arboreal display animal, maybe an annulated boa that's a little bit more uncommon and kind of cool to work with might be a good option. Next up, I've actually talked about a couple different times. Now, we all know about milk snakes, right? We know they come from all over. There's a bunch of different subspecies out, some of the largest of which come from Central America, like the black milk snakes and the Honduran milk snakes. But there's actually a South American milk snake that is in fact one of the largest. It really comes into number 2 spot right under the black milks, and that's the Andean milk snake. So obviously, this animal comes from the Andes Mountains parts of Peru, essentially it runs along there. They live in the Andes Mountains at elevations at sometimes over 9,000 feet up. That's actually about 12 to 1,500 plus or minus than the elevation I'm currently at where I am, which is already considerably higher than Denver, which to a lot of people is already really high too, which is much higher than we see a lot of different species of snakes. I'm not sure where Marshmallow's going. Marshmallow's going to go try to bother the indigo. I don't know if that's the smartest idea, little girl. She likes to eat everything. Now, the Andean milk snake is really cool. As I said, they are the second largest species of milk snake, getting over 6 feet long, which is amazingly cool. Little ones just look like kind of every other kind of bog standard tricolor milk snake of the standard diet of the standard stripes, black, red, and yellow, in whatever pattern that may be at the time. However, as they get older, they do change a little bit. As they get older, that black really starts to bleed out into the other bands. Not nearly as much as obviously the black milks that can be entirely black if they are a really nice black line, but it does kind of give it almost like a muddied or faded look to it, which is really cool. Now, obviously, being at that high of an altitude generally means that they do prefer lower temps, which is another really cool thing, which makes it a little bit easier for keepers to keep them in the hobby. Like the Hondurans, like the black milks, they tend to be a little bit more slower growing, a little bit more placid, not as high strung as, say, like a Pueblan or a Nelson's milk snake. Not to say that they're bad by any means whatsoever. And if you're planning on finding and keeping an Andean milk snake, I have done research and talked to several people who have reproduced them. They seem to do better at those cooler temps with a low hotspot, be it in a rack system or in an actual large enclosure, versus ambient temperature that a lot of large amount of collection keepers keep their colubrids at, where they'll just kind of keep the room to an actual temperature. They really do seem to benefit from having a cooler temp in general, like a cooler kind of crested gecko type temperature with a low hot spot for them to go and thermoregulate. This next one is the one that I probably know the least about, and that is the Dunn's python. Now, the Dunn's python is actually a subspecies of the Mcdougall's python, or Liasis. That's the genus that they belong to. They come from the Indo-Pacific area along Papua New Guinea and West Papua. They are very similar to the Mcdougall's pythons, both in appearance and in care. So it's a 6 to 7-ish foot long python, a little bit more slender bodied, pretty arboreal, probably, and then as they get older, their head gets kind of a little bit boxy. The Mcdougall's are known for, what are you doing, little silly? The Mcdougall's are known for their really nice, kind of cool, bright silver eyes, not quite as, prominent as, say, the Savu pythons, that's another one of the genus, and their kind of cool coloration. The Dunn's pythons are a much more hard to come by, pretty rare in the hobby subspecies that are very similar. However, they do seem to have two different faces. One kind of a more coppery bronze color with darker specks, and then another one that's a little bit more grayish with lighter specks. They are really cool, and they do have a reputation, both the Duns and the Maclots have a reputation, especially as babies, to be pretty flighty and pretty reactive, and the only way that a baby snake has to react with the world with is their face. And so they get a kind of a nasty reputation for being kind of bitey. However, like 99% of all species that we work with, the more you work with them, the more you learn to work with them and trust them. There is quite a bit of confidence building, and they end up being a really nice, handleable animal. Not too many people work with them, especially here in the States, one of which we all probably know and I've already thought about is Tom Crutchfield, who at least in the past has kept them. Not 100% sure if he has reproduced them, at least in the States. I'm not sure if anybody has, but I know there are a couple UK forums that I went digging through that they were keeping pairs and working on actively breeding. Of course, those were dated back in like 2017. So, to finish this off, number one, Marshmallow has decided to become my new ponytail. So, don't need a scrunchie when you have a bull snake, right? But this last one is one that I think is absolutely really, really cool. Did she pee? I think she peed on me a little bit. No? Okay, we're good. This last one is really, really cool. It's probably my favorite on the list, and the one most likely, other than the probable Andean milk snake, that I will actually get first. And this belongs to the genus Goniosoma, which also has the red-tailed rat snakes and the rhino rat snakes in. It's actually something that I really want to do is eventually get every single species of not only Pituophis, so Marshmallow here, and the Goniosoma, those Asian rat snakes. Now, this one is a really, really cool and interesting one. This is what is sometimes called the rain rat snake, and they are beautiful. They're probably one of the smaller species of the genus, and they look very similar to that of the rhino rat snake with kind of a little bit of a larger head. They're a little bit smaller, usually staying under 3 feet long, a little bit more slender, almost exclusively arboreal, and they have a lot of very similar traits where just like the rhino rat snakes, they go through an autogenetic change where they're kind of a more grayscale similar to the rhinos, or sometimes even kind of a dirt brown kind of color, but as they get older, they slowly start to change until eventually you get either that green or that blue, silly, or that kind of turquoisey blue color as well. And there's this kind of sweet spot in their change when they're kind of a subadult or juvenile, where it hasn't entirely become entirely uniform in color as mature adults will look, but they kind of have this almost kind of gray speckling or little dusting of color in that really beautiful turquoise or green coloration. Amazing, amazing snakes. They're very hard to come by. There are a couple people working with them here in the States. There are, again, more over in the UK, as with a lot of these oddball species. I think, oh, no, didn't lose the lights just yet. And they are really, really cool. Like a lot of the Goniosoma and the Asian rat snakes, they do have a tendency to be pretty finicky, and they take a little bit of a more well-seasoned hand, we'll say, to get them accustomed to and get them set up. But once they're comfortable and established, they're very easy to take care of. And that is the 5 really cool species. However, I'm going to throw in an extra little 6th one just because they are amazing. So this kind of surprise 6th one here at the end is another of the Goniosoma. And this is absolutely beautiful. This is Goniosoma margaritum, and this is why they're called that. Look at that. They're also sometimes called the rainbow rat snake or the rainbow tree snake. This is it's such a beautiful snake. I mean, look at this thing. Now, almost nothing is known about these. I know there's a couple of them floating around. I know Snakes and Adders in the UK has talked about them a couple times. I don't know if anyone is reproducing them. As far as I'm aware, they're not threatened or endangered, so they can be exported. They're really beautiful, and again, this is another one of the ones that I would love to be able to have and add to the captive-born populations here in the United States. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video. You got to see Marshmallow be a complete dork and try to wrap up my hair. If you guys enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe if you can. Hit the bell notification. It helps me out. Let you guys know when I have new updates. Usually twice a week. I'm doing lots of the little short YouTube videos and doing more on TikTok, blah, 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 about that. And also, if you really do enjoy this content, if you want to consider checking out my Patreon, I have several different levels from just, hey, I thank you and I really support it, to being acknowledged in the credit, merch every single time, updates about what's going on behind the scenes. When I do start shipping out, or if I have animals available to ship out, you get early access to availability lists and all that other fun stuff. I have the links down below in my bio, as well as merch for a Teespring store. That's enough of my shameless plugging. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to see other top 5 videos, I have the whole playlist like I do at the end of every single video of the top 5 list. If you want to help with that, helps my click-through rate, all of that fun YouTube, social media content creator jazz. But again, hope you enjoyed the video. As I repeat for the 3rd time, if you want to see anything else, let me know down in the comments. Email me questions, comments, concerns, everything like that. Hope you're having a great day, and we will check you next time.